There is something Americans do not sufficiently appreciate about their own country, which is that it was not inevitable. No law of history required 13 colonies to produce a constitution. No axiom of political science guaranteed that a document written by slaveholders would contain within it the seeds of its own moral correction. No iron necessity decreed that a nation founded on the radical proposition that government derives its authority from the governed would survive its first century, let alone its second and a half. America was and remains an experiment. The word is not a metaphor. It is a precise description. An experiment is a structured attempt to discover whether a hypothesis is true. The American hypothesis, stripped of its poetry, is this: that a large, diverse, commercially energetic people can govern themselves through reasoned argument, codified rights, and institutional restraint without recourse to a king, a state church, or an official ideology. For 250 years, the experiment has not been disproved. That is not the same as saying it has succeeded. Experiments do not succeed. They continue, or they are abandoned. The question before the Republic today is not whether the experiment has produced good results so far. It manifestly has, alongside grievous failures, but whether the nation still possesses the intellectual and moral resources to continue running it. My fear is that it does not, and my fear has a specific name. It is not decadence or socialism or any foreign adversary. It is the slow replacement of argument with identity. The creeping belief on all sides that who you are determines what is true. The mythology of the American founding tends to obscure the thing that was genuinely remarkable about it. The remarkable thing was not that the founders agreed. They disagreed, violently, personally, and on nearly every point of substance. Hamilton wanted a national bank and something approaching monarchy. Jefferson wanted an agrarian republic. Adams trusted no one. Franklin trusted everyone but expected the worst. Madison changed his mind about the most fundamental structural questions between 1787 and 1798. What they built was not a consensus but a machine for managing disagreement. The Constitution is not a statement of shared values. It is an architecture of structured conflict, separated powers, overlapping jurisdictions, enumerated rights that exist precisely to protect the unpopular from the popular. The Bill of Rights is not a hymn to what Americans believe. It is a barricade against what majorities might do. This is the American genius, and it is profoundly uncomfortable. It means that the health of the Republic depends not on citizens agreeing with one another, but on their willingness to disagree within the structure. To accept that the man whose views you find abhorrent has the same right to hold them that you do, and that the process of argument is more sacred than any conclusion it might reach. The strongest case for democracy has never been optimism about human nature. It is pessimism. Men are flawed enough that none of them can be trusted with unchecked power over others. The American arrangement was not designed for a virtuous people. It was designed for a contentious, ambitious, occasionally wicked people who had the good sense to chain themselves to a process rather than a creed. America, in its 250th year, suffers from two diseases, and they are mirror images of one another. The first disease is the belief, prevalent on the political right, that American exceptionalism is a fixed inheritance rather than an ongoing achievement, that the Republic will endure because it is America, that the institutions will hold because they have held, and that the character of the nation is guaranteed by its origins. This is the fallacy of essentialism applied to politics. No nation has an essence. Nations have habits, and habits can be broken. Rome had habits too. The second disease is the belief, prevalent on the political left, that the American experiment is so compromised by its historical sins, slavery, dispossession, imperialism, that the experiment itself is fraudulent, that the Constitution is not a self-correcting mechanism, but a monument to hypocrisy, that the language of universal rights is merely a mask for particular power. Both diseases are fatal in the same way. They relieve the citizen of the obligation to do the difficult daily work of self-government. If American greatness is guaranteed, there is nothing to do. If American greatness is a lie, there is nothing worth doing. Both positions produce the same civic paralysis. The failure on both sides is the same: the substitution of faith for inquiry, of certainty for investigation. And beneath that intellectual failure lies a deeper moral one: the inability to hold simultaneously the knowledge that a thing is deeply flawed and the conviction that it is worth repairing. The Republic requires citizens who can think clearly and care deeply, and it is getting fewer of both. Let me state plainly what I believe, so that I may be plainly refuted if I am wrong. I believe the American experiment remains the most successful large-scale attempt in human history to organize a diverse society around the principle of individual liberty under law. I say this not because America has always honored this principle and has often betrayed it, but because it has built into its own structure the means of correction. The 13th Amendment did not fall from heaven. It was forced into existence by argument, by blood, and by the very mechanisms the Constitution provided. The Civil Rights Act of 1964 was not the gift of enlightened rulers. It was extracted from a reluctant nation by citizens who took the nation's own stated principles more seriously than the nation did. This capacity for self-correction is not a minor feature of the American system. It is the system, and it is rarer than Americans suppose. Most civilizations that have committed injustices on the scale of American slavery did not subsequently produce, from within their own institutional framework, the legal and political means of redress. They collapsed, or they were conquered, or the injustice persisted until revolution destroyed the structure entirely. America corrected itself imperfectly, incompletely, agonizingly slowly, but through its own constitutional mechanics. That this happened is not evidence that the system is perfect. It is evidence that the system works. I believe this system can endure for another 250 years, but I do not believe it will endure automatically. The Republic has enemies, and they are not principally foreign. The most dangerous enemies of the American experiment are those who have stopped believing that argument is how a free society governs itself. They are found on every point of the political spectrum. They have forgotten, or never learned, that the Constitution does not protect what you believe. It protects your right to be wrong. Clear thinking is a moral obligation, but moral seriousness requires more than logic. It requires the trained capacity to recognize the good, even when the good is unfashionable, uncomfortable, or demanding. A civilization which loses the ability to argue honestly is a civilization that has begun to die. What the Republic requires for its next quarter millennium is not a new ideology. It is not a return to some imagined golden age. It is not a program of national renewal dreamed up by intellectuals. It is something far more modest and far more difficult: a critical mass of citizens who are willing to do four things: to hold their own convictions with enough seriousness to argue for them and enough humility to consider that they might be wrong. This is the rarest of intellectual virtues, and it is the one the Republic was designed to cultivate, to distinguish between the person and the argument. The quality of an idea does not depend on the moral character of the person who holds it, any more than the truth of a mathematical proof depends on the mathematician's personal life. America has entered a period in which the source of a claim matters more than its content. This is the death of reason, and it will be the death of the Republic if it continues. To accept that the Constitution is a process, not a destination. It does not promise justice. It provides a framework within which justice can be pursued by imperfect people who disagree about what justice means. The moment any faction decides that the process is an obstacle to the outcome they desire, the experiment is over. And most demandingly, to love the Republic for what it is rather than what they wish it were. Not because it is perfect, but because it is real. Because its flaws are your flaws, its failures your failures, and its possibilities your possibilities. Patriotism of this kind is not the loud, easy patriotism of flags and anthems. It is the quiet, difficult patriotism of showing up at a school board meeting, of reading a bill before having an opinion about it, of voting for the candidate you disagree with least, rather than staying home in principled disgust. The American experiment began with an unfinished sentence. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. A sentence written by a slaveholder, adopted by a Congress that did not extend its protections to half the population, and left for subsequent generations to make true or to expose as a lie. Every generation since has faced the same choice: finish the sentence or abandon it. Lincoln finished a clause at Gettysburg. The suffragists finished another. The civil rights movement finished another still. None of them completed it. The sentence remains unfinished because it was designed to remain unfinished, not as a failure of draftsmanship, but as an invitation to every future American to take up the pen. This is the plea. Not that America is great, not that America is good, but that America is unfinished, and that an unfinished experiment is infinitely more valuable than a completed monument. Monuments are admired. Experiments are continued. The Republic does not need your admiration. It needs your participation, your dissent, your argument, your willingness to be wrong in public and to correct course when the evidence demands it. 250 years is a long time for an experiment. Most do not last so long, but this one can, not because it is American, which guarantees nothing, but because the hypothesis it tests is sound, that free people arguing honestly under a common law can govern themselves. The hypothesis has not been disproved. The experiment has not been concluded. The next 250 years are yours to run. Do not waste them on certainty.